Hey, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Scot McRae. I'm the co-founder of Candidate.ID, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Becky Pulley from Adevinta and Matt from Cielo Talent. Becky, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I've been working at Adevinta for 2 years. So we are a marketplace specialist. So we own seller-to-seller marketplaces, digital marketplaces across the world. Been there for 2 years, leading their employer brand globally. Previous to that, I've worked at places like BT, private healthcare, pub groups, hospitality, McDonald's, kind of everywhere and anywhere, you name it, but always in the world of recruitment and employer brand. So that's me.
Great. And Matt?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. Matt Jones, SVP Global Operations for Cielo. I've been in Cielo and recruitment process outsourcing for a very long time, so 16, 17 years now. Been fortunate to work with clients all over the world and still today. My role in operations, I lead our technology and our technology platform deliveries to our clients around the world, as well as looking at our people and process, so kind of our operating model.
Great. So we're going to talk today about about hiring, in-demand talent. And I mean, obviously, organization by organization, in-demand talent means something different. What does it mean to Adevinta, Becky?
Yeah, so in-demand talent for us is very much in the world of tech. So we look for real kind of like specialist technologists. So data, machine learning, DevOps, backend engineers. And because we, although we're based in Barcelona as our head office, we look after marketplaces all over the world. So they need to be able to speak local language, global languages. So it adds to the complication on top of an already scarce talent pool as well. So it's, and it is probably about, I would say about 70% of all of our hiring every year is in the tech space as well. So it makes it quite a challenge to bring in people that consistently at that level.
Great. And Matt?
It means quite a few different things to us. We have around 200 clients in around 100 and something countries in the world, so across many sectors. But in healthcare, that can be certain clinical roles. Actually, I would put certain nursing talent in that area as well, because of the real shortage around the world. In advanced manufacturing and engineering, there's a lot of roles in that area. In pharmaceutical life sciences, medical devices, your quality, your RAQA, your regulatory type positions. But oil and gas, engineering, that kind of piece. But I think the one thing that would characterize it to me and to us and to all of our clients is, yes, it's where there's a skills shortage, but it's also where everyone else is looking as well. So you have a supply issue, and you have small supply, and you have over demand, and that's just kind of been exacerbated over the last few years. So that's what it means to us.
Yeah, and what would you, in your experience, let's come to like how you can be successful in kind of like overcoming this challenge. So what would you say, Becky, in your experience of Adevinta is key to, going about how you go about hiring, kind of in-demand talent where, demand outstrips supply?
Yeah, so you need to put a huge amount of focus on, I guess the front end of the engine is how we describe it. So all of the stuff around your attraction processes, loads of sourcing as well. So there is a huge amount of like candidate outreach has made a big difference for us, that consistent messaging as well. And I think this is the thing, so often companies will be a bit like, right, we'll do a concerted campaign and then it drops out. And then you try to go back again 6 months later. And by that point, everyone's kind of forgotten about you because the industry moves so quickly, as does the connections into candidates. So for me, it's about that kind of consistent messaging, consistent brand awareness as well, so that when those people are ready to move, you're already front of mind. So we know, so for us in our world, candidates might be getting contacted by 5 or 6 recruiters a week. And you just have to be the lucky person at the moment who goes onto LinkedIn on that day and has sent the right kind of message to the right person at the exact right moment for them to be like, okay, I will have that conversation with you. So actually, if you're consistently having those conversations with them and sharing those messages, then you're able to kind of be front of mind, and also having something that does make you unique and stand out. So being quite transparent with your messages about this is what we are and this is the experience you'll get with us, so that people actually can see that you're a bit different to other people. Because I think, especially in the world of employer brand, everyone's really, really keen to keep it quite generic so that we're a bit of a catch-all where we are appealing to everyone. Whereas for really niche roles, you need to be able to show that you are a bit different and kind of give them that reason to come and join you. So that for us is super important as well.
Yeah, I think that if, when you're building kind of employer brand for career side, if you like, it's pretty difficult to be, highly focused and specific and, targeted to, specific, role types. So trying to get that more into kind of like outreach or attraction campaigns. Yeah, and Matt.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think Becky said a lot of really important stuff there. I mean, absolutely having the right message. I think there's no doubt it's become easier. I've been doing this for about 20 years. It's definitely become easier to find prospective candidates, prospective employees, applicants, however we want to describe them. But it's definitely become harder to persuade them to come and join, right? There's more choice. So as the digital world has made people more visible, it's also made opportunity more visible to people, right? And no greater than in the last year or so, where we've all been at home quite a lot and had no one looking over our shoulders to check what we're looking at on our screens while we're doing our job, right? So there's more choice. You can find people, but there's more choice. So convincing people to join, making the call at the right time, having a kind of compelling reason to join, I think has become more and more important than ever. The other thing that we've seen a lot of, and probably driven a little bit as a service provider, is the crossover of skills between industry. So I remember 10 or 15 years ago in recruiting, there wasn't much talk about moving quality professionals from food into production quality of medicines, right? But that's happened a lot more over the last 10 years or so. And so now you're not only competing against your competitors, you're competing against everybody who needs that kind of skill set and talent. And I think Great TA has driven some of that, because we persuaded our organizations to look outside of the traditional hiring, but that was also created more challenge around engaging and convincing people to join. We have around 2,000 recruiting professionals around the world, and there's no doubt we spend a ton of time finding people and engaging people. But I think getting the top of funnel isn't as difficult as converting into kind of people who want to come and join you at the right time. So
a lot of this kind of, I think, it sounds kind of quite manual, or maybe a lot of it's done quite, manually at the moment, like almost one-to-one. How do you do it at scale?
So I think you have to combine kind of business process and technology in order to look at where you can automate, you can bring some scale using tools like Candidate.ID to that outreach activity and that engagement activity. It's got to be things that people, candidates, applicants are willing to consume in that way as well. So there's no doubt there's still a really strong place for a recruiter conversation. The key is shifting the recruiter conversation or the sourcer conversation to the point at which Becky or Scott is really engaged and ready to go. So we kind of automate the pieces and bring sort of systems to help drive kind of outreach activity and put content in front of people, and then knowing when the right time to call those people is, or the right kind of message is kind of important. So all the tools that have been available for a long time around outreach work and campaign work and all of those kind of good tools are still relevant and useful. But as with Candidate.ID, having a way to actually understand the candidate sentiment and readiness is kind of key, really. Right? Otherwise, you're just making double, triple, 10x the number of calls that you might need to do, which you may have the luxury of a huge TA budget. I don't know many people that do right now, Becky. So,
Nope.
but also, calling someone at the wrong time as well, if they're one of only a few candidates that could be suitable, that has an opposite effect from an engagement perspective as well. So I think, automating the outreach, automating the ability to reach these people, having great content, having great stories is good. The final piece of the puzzle is what tools like Candidate.ID can bring to the picture, which is understanding the readiness and the ability for people to want to take your call, so that you can, number one, focus the effort where you're going to get results, and number two, continue the good engagement. So
yeah, and I completely. Sorry.
I was going to say, Becky, I mean, you've got like lots of, I mean, you both got lots of stuff kind of like running, but Becky, what's your kind of experience about when when you're trying to do this at scale?
Yeah, so I think for us as well, I mean, it makes a lot of difference because and especially we're in a really data-driven company, and at the moment, like my team is really focused on the employer brand and attraction stuff, and we can say all of this great data around this is how many people it's reaching, this is how many people are engaging with it, but there's that drop off in between in terms of like that piece and then making an application. So actually having that kind of piece through the middle is helping us almost like fix those gaps in the data in between as well, so we can start to see a lot more around what about our content is really engaging people. So for me, again, the big thing that we've had to do is switch up the dynamics in the team and make sure we've got the right people in place to actually like spend more time and energy focusing on that content and making sure that we've got a funnel of our pipeline then goes in at the top end instead. So it is making it easier for my team to prove that what they're doing is having an impact as well, which I think is brilliant. But it does mean that, again, we kind of had that consistent loop in and out of our ATS. So when we are working with a candidate who then chooses actually now isn't the right time, or my circumstances have changed, or for whatever reason kind of drop out of a process, we can then funnel them back in and keep that consistent loop going as well. Because so often, and I mean, let's be honest, our ATS databases become huge pools of candidates that we don't really do anything with. So actually this is helping us, again, tighten that loop back up again, so we can utilize all those people that have applied that haven't quite made it through to the final stages, as well as bring people in externally as well. So actually for us, doing it this way is making life a lot easier for us. It's having to, at the moment, is a lot of my team having to like change the way that they think about how we're doing this and what we're doing, but I think it's really starting to kind of like, we're really starting to kind of pick up a bit of speed now. It's almost like it's starting to change a lot of mindsets, and we're looking at new ways to use the system as well, which is really great for us.
Great. And so, we might have covered a bit of this before, but so obviously Candidate.ID is marketing automation technology. What do you think is coming together to make it kind of so relevant kind of right now? I'll go to Matt.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's definitely some external dynamic in terms of the way the market is right now. I don't know about you, Becky, but I just don't remember a candidate market like this ever across the whole world, right? We've definitely seen candidate-driven markets in certain regions or countries or segments or skill sets, but like to have it happen this way right now globally is kind of unique. So I think there's some external factors that are driving this as well. I think those things existed before the last 2 years. This has just been an accelerator, right? It's been a catalyst for people to think a little bit more. So it's getting investment dollars on the table, investment pounds on the table right now to invest in this. I think the technology landscape is matured. So we were doing some of this community work 10, 12 years ago with big oil and gas organizations, and there was just gaps all over in the HR tech capability to connect all these things together, right? So there was a lot of, you had to be manual. Candidate.ID didn't really exist at that point, or nor did kind of nodal based external marketing for careers. So I think the technology's right. And then I think it's just, we're starting to see the C-suite understand the importance of some of these niche skills or in-demand skills and the disproportionate impact 5% age requisitions or unfilled positions of these kind of roles have. Because like if you just had an old-fashioned scorecard and said, hey, 95% of our positions get filled within the time that we said we'd fill them, and they remain filled and we're very happy, that might look all green. But if the 5% is in some particular engineering talent, in some particular quality area that's required to get product out the door, for example, or is required to drive innovation in product strategy or sell or something else like that, it has a hugely disproportionate impact on the organization. And I think we're, over the last 5 years or so, we're starting to see CEOs and COOs kind of understand that. And so putting pressure through CHRO and down into talent to say, what are we doing about this particular piece? So I've had more conversations with organizations about segmenting talent and the needs in the last 2 or 3 years than I've had in 20 years. So I think those are some of the conditions that we're seeing. I'm sure, Becky, you've got some real specifics in your organization as well.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you said there about the technology has got more sophisticated. I also think TA teams have got more sophisticated as well. So again, having worked in employer brand for I guess 8-9 years now, I've seen a huge shift in that, in terms of kind of going from kind of placing adverts in newspapers and hoping that it's doing the right thing, up to where we are now, which is actually everything we do needs to be able to tie back into like data and analytics, and are we getting a return on investment that we can actually be able to physically track. So you have that, and as well, in the world of employer brand, we are trying to keep up with what I refer to as our big brothers in the world of consumer marketing or B2B marketing. And tools like this, and the way that we're trying to move that, is this is the kind of stuff that's going to help us get closer to that. Our budgets will always lag behind, there's no denying that, but this is a way that we are trying to make that step forward to being a much more sophisticated, not just TA function, but recruitment marketing function as well. And I think that's making a huge difference, alongside this consistent shift closer and closer towards people analytics and people data, because HR teams are starting to understand that more and pushing that onto TA as well, and vice versa. As we understand more of what we're doing, it's kind of working in both directions. So I think that real push for data, alongside the TA team becoming more sophisticated, along with everything that you were saying there as well, Matt. I think, like I say, we're almost in a bit of that perfect storm at the moment of everything coming together at the right time.
Yeah, I really agree on the employer brand piece as well. I think it's, we've seen, again, last 5 years or so, significantly more investment, recognizing that, it's a different thing to your consumer brand, but that in some areas it potentially crosses over. You have that convergence of consumer and employer brand, which is good for the company and good for the organization and good for the stakeholders and shareholders. So yeah, totally agree.
What would you, there's there's a lot of new technology in talent acquisition, and it's quite a complex landscape to navigate. So your Candidate.ID as marketing automation, how would you describe it as being different to like ATS and CRM? I'll start with Matt.
Yeah, I was just smiling about the HR tech space. I think it was four tech vendors acquired last week by competitors and so on and so forth. So of each other. So that space continues to kind of evolve, and there's more and more investment flowing in and more consolidation and stuff happening. So I think the key difference, or when we talk about marketing automation, is really the focus on engagement and tracking, and understanding the kind of sentiment of the candidate or the applicant or the prospect. I like to think about them as well, right? So this is less about a repository and matching and ring fencing. It's more about understanding how these individuals are consuming employer brand information or your stories out there in the world, but bringing some. I'm an operator, so bringing some logic and systematic approach to that as well, which you can then say, right, this is my workflow for this activity, and at the end of this, to Becky's point, I can measure this, I can talk about what it's doing, and I can then use that data to dial it up or down, change what I'm doing, or invest more, or do whatever. So I think one of the key points of differentiation is being more specific about generating engagement and interested and excited and engaged candidates or applicants, as opposed to just finding profiles, right, of which you may find 1,000 and none of them are actually willing to talk to you. So
yeah, and I really like the tie into the recruitment team as well. I feel like sometimes, obviously with ATSs are aside, right, that is there for application through to hire. With this, I like the fact that it does all of that great stuff around telling stories and bringing people along on that journey with you and automating that along the way. I like the way that it ties into recruiters. So it kind of, rather than saying to them, okay, we've got this talent pool, they are engaged to a certain degree, let's send them out, let's send everyone a kind of a job alert. This is very much like, actually, this candidate's now ready for us to pick up the phone and have a conversation. And it helps us shift from that whole world of like, let's just blast everyone and hope for the best, to allowing our recruiters to, and for me, my sources, to really have those great conversations with people who are already knowledgeable to a certain level, already showing those engagement signs. So again, it kind of helps bring that piece of like recruitment, marketing, employer brand, and the recruitment process stuff much closer together. It helps align them a lot more, because your recruiters will be able to see at the other end, or here's actually a really tight list of people who are already engaged, that you're not going to have to, like say, spend a lot of time trying to convince them that this is the right thing for them, because they will have that kind of knowledge and understanding. So for me, it kind of helps bring those two worlds a lot closer together as well.
Scott, and Becky, we talk a lot about, or I've talked a lot about intelligent automation over the years. I mean, we've all been to HR conferences where like AI and automation's been the word for like the last 10 years. But when I think about automation, I think about intelligent automation, which is kind of like using the automation to do things that give you 10x the results that a person would. Right, and then and releasing the people then to have the human interactions and conversations. We're not at a place yet where you can automate a recruiting process, because there needs to be an emotional connection between the person, the applicant, the candidate, and the employer. And at the moment, one of the ways we achieve that is human interaction, right? So that, I don't think that will change for a while. I think that we may get there at some point in the future, but for the next few years, that's always going to be there. And for in-demand talent, I think it's going to remain long term. But so I think in the short term, I think, well, use automation intelligently, use the automation to keep running the communication and reaching people where they are and giving them content they want to digest and consume, and release the people time then to have the quality conversations, create emotional connections, and bring people in. So I mean, I put you in the very good bucket of intelligent automation, which is super helpful, particularly when you're a service provider and you're looking after a couple of hundred clients globally, making hundreds of thousands of hires. You know, where do we focus the human interactions versus using technology to be an accelerator for us?
Yeah, one of the things that we see time and time again is that when you look to engage target group of prospects, but you engage them with your story, okay? Not necessarily, I mean, the jobs are in the mix, right? The opportunities are in the mix, but they're not front and center. But you're telling your story, significantly higher engagement rates in terms of like, kind of opens and visits and engagement with lots of different types of content than you see anywhere else, like 60-70% kind of like open rates, and with really, I mean, the kind of like, if in semiconductors, whether it's software engineers or embedded hardware engineers in difficult locations. But then there's the group that significantly engage and start to look at the job, so that, as you say, the recruiters can really kind of focus in on, okay, we're going to pick up the phone and try and talk to these people now. And we see that, time and time again and then obviously you can layer over all of the if this then that automation to add more and more kind of like sophistication. If you were when you're selling this to either like a client or to your own kind of like internal kind of team, either your senior management team or your actual kind of like recruiting team, what would you, I'll start with Becky. What would you kind of stress and emphasize when you're selling it into like the C-suite, okay, firstly, and then to your own like TA team?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, the way that we've been talking about it internally at our end is, we want to recruit on demand, right? So it's not like it's not like in January we say, okay, we know at these points, these are the people we want to recruit. Then recruitment is, and always will be, a little bit haphazard, because people leave, things change, especially in the business I'm in, there is a consistent pattern of change. And our message to the business is, if do you want us to be able to, when you say, I need a back-end engineer with 8 years experience, if you want us to be able to do that and do that quickly, we need a tool like this that's going to help us make sure that we know, of the hundreds of people out there, these 5 are the ones that are already engaged with us. We can pick up that phone and speed up that process. So it's very much like, do you want us to be able to deliver these kind of people at the right quality in the right time really quickly? And when they say yes, that's when we can explain what this tool is, and it makes a lot of difference. And for our that's obviously within the business, and for our recruitment team, again, it's like, do you want to spend 4 weeks sending endless messages to candidates and getting 20-30% response rates, or do you want a list of 5 candidates who we've pre-qualified and who are ready to go, so that actually you can move that really, really quickly and pick up the conversation from a point of, you know a bit about us, we know a bit about you, let's now have a really detailed conversation about what you're actually looking for in your career. And they've all been really on board with it. We haven't had anyone really question why we would do it this way. The way that we've been able to get everyone on board has been really fantastic. I'm quite lucky. My SVP of people is really, she's looking for ways for us to scale this globally. So we are growing quite a lot as a company. So as we start to bring on more and more kind of parts of our business and look at how we do things differently, everything we've always done has been about how do we automate it and how can we run it at a global scale. So being able to sell that into her to say, actually, this is going to help us automate this part, so we can therefore focus our energy on those really value-add conversations, has been the real kind of winner for us there. Made it a very easy process.
Yeah, and Matt, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was just thinking, actually, one of the great things about what we do when we partner as an outsourced provider is we're having pretty much the same conversations Becky's having, because what we do is very much aligned with what an internal TA team would do, or a CHRO is kind of looking for. The thing I was just reflecting on is, and it was back to a point you made, Becky, of the increased sophistication of internal TA and HR, that maybe 5-10 years ago, we were probably being asked 10% of the time to talk about what our sort of segmentation strategy was and what we're going to do about niche talent, or or this particular segment that was really hard to fill, right? Nowadays, it's definitely north of 50, I'd say closer to 70% of the time, our TA buyers, so prospective clients and existing clients, are asking us, what are you doing in this area? So there isn't a ton of sell, because we're now working with a more educated audience around the world, which is great. We place a lot of focus on data, as Becky's organization does. So the sort of sell internally for me is relatively straightforward. If we set this up correctly and we achieve what we want to achieve, as in we're pointing at the right talent, we've set things up correctly, we're operationalizing it and executing it properly, then the results will speak for themselves. And we have some really smart people running our client programs, so they'll see the results. It makes our clients happy, it makes our candidates who become employees happy, and so it becomes a kind of virtuous cycle of continuing to kind of scale out. So yeah,
I mean, we kind of see this mindset shift from that kind of hitting the phones, starting from scratch, kind of every time, to much more of a kind of ongoing kind of build the talent pool, nurture and engage, and use the technology to tell you who it is that you should convert, as you say, on demand when things go live. And I don't know if you kind of, Becky, what have you kind of experienced from a kind of mindset shift within?
Yeah, I think the big thing, so in terms of mindset shifting in the TA team, yeah, I think the big thing for me is that they are, and this is very, very typical of my company. As soon as we've kind of talked about this is the end goal, that we will have this pool of people ready to hire at the other end. As soon as we said that, they're a bit like, well, how many people are there now? How do we do that? So they are really excited about it, because all of them are, again, they're tech recruiters, the whole team are, and they know how difficult it is. So anything that they see as like something that makes their life a bit easier and more focused is brilliant. The big thing that we're having to do with them at the moment is remind them consistently about adding tags into candidates, so that, again, we have that loop coming back into our Candidate.ID system. So we're having to every week say, this week you've given us 18 candidates, now it's 40, now it's 60. So we're kind of consistently telling them that that's happening and sharing that information back. So I think for us, it's getting the team away from that, like, I have a requisition that I need to fill, to this is a candidate who could be brilliant for Adevinta but isn't quite right here, and how can we make sure that that person doesn't get lost to us. So how do we kind of keep in touch with them? So that's something that we are consistently looking at building back into the team, and especially our TA team, who are, I guess, our kind of candidate facing team. For mine, it is much more of that shift in mindset of like, we're doing all of this kind of like, just like the kind of campaign stuff to drive to applications. How do you change that messaging? So it's much more about this two-way relationship, and how do we give to them before we expect them to just, you know, change their lives and come and join us. So it's changing the way that we communicate, as well as changing the way that the team think about the candidates that are coming through as well.
Matt, what do you think about, you know, when you think about your client teams and how how the technology will enable kind of different behaviors to you know, improve the effectiveness?
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate in many ways that we have scale. So, you know, we with the number of clients we have and with the size of teams, we can test certain things through scale. I think one of the things we've seen over the last few years is this kind of move almost to creating new skills within the teams around kind of marketing or engagement. So some of our teams already globally have this kind of notion of a engagement recruiter, or whatever description you want to give it, but that is a role that is more focused on selling opportunities than it is sourcing or processing or taking orders, taking, you know, requisition orders or whatever else. So I think that's one of the things we're seeing, and I expect to see more of that. So as we build more, as we see this happening in more organizations around the world, as we build more of these kind of ongoing communities or engagement groups or whatever, having a kind of engagement skill set as part of the team, I think is going to be more and more kind of prevalent. Our teams have always felt the need for how do we find I mean, Becky, you'll say the same, right? Any TA team has felt the need for a long time of how do you know, it's the hard roles that sit on a board or sit on a dashboard, and, you know, we know we want to get them filled sooner and quicker with the right talent. So I think you're pushing against an open door with practitioners here. But I think it does again, it kind of specializes a little bit what we do, in the same way that a few years ago we saw campaign management come into the TA role around, you know, programmatic advertising and a connection to employer branding. I think engagement of hard to find talent, in demand talent, niche talent is going to become more of a role, particularly as we can automate more in the process, right? Again, it becomes back to that more kind of human connection. So I think we'll see more of that in the coming years for sure.
Yeah, and I think you know, whether it is, you know, a sourcing exercise or whether it is a attraction exercise through advertising, I mean, let's just say that either one of those, you kind of touch 100 people, and there might only be one where the timing's absolutely right, but there'll be 30 or 40 others that are, well, that's kind of interesting. So how do you get them in and nurture them kind of ongoing for the future? That sort of mindset shift. And how do we do that? How do we get them in? And then how do we tell them our story over time until the timing is right for them? You know, so
that's the marketing. That's bringing the marketing into the recruiting, isn't it? That's having a marketing mindset. It's in the same way, you know, marketing automation is coming into TA and recruiting through Candidate.ID to bring that focus. We've got to bring some of that skill set, and it might in smaller teams it's going to be retraining individuals. In larger teams it can be acquiring that skill into the team. But you're right, so we look beyond the hire, right? Because the risk is you nurture this great pool and you make your 10 hires, and then great, you know, that there should be sustainability in that pool, refresh it, and it should be a living, breathing kind of thing. So I think that's bringing the marketing skill set into, and Scott, you're from marketing, you'll know the right role, right? But it's bringing the right kind of marketing skill set into the TA world.
Yeah, it's called demand gen over in marketing. It's called demand generation, which is like the ongoing strategic exercise of high quality lead generation. So yeah, well, look, that's it. That's all the questions that I have. Like, I want to thank you for both of you for your time today and your input. And yeah, as I say, we'll share the on-demand version. And yeah, great talking to you. Thanks so much for sharing your insights.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Scott.
Cheers.